My name is Wendy. I'm 63 years old and I have been sober for 43 years. And for several of those years, I lived in my car while running an Alano club. And this is going to be about the invisible disabilities that many people have. The kind that get you to, people say to you, well, you don't look sick, but of course they don't live in your body, so they don't really know. So I'll start off. I've had a tremor since I was 7 years old. That's been quite apparent. So people always think I'm nervous, even when I'm not nervous, although often I am nervous. So I left home when I was 15 and I became a waitress. And, um, and I was a terrible waitress. Not only did I have a tremor, but after about 6 hours, one leg would drag behind me. And so um, I was I there were incidents when I was a waitress, and one I remember in particular was I was coming, and I would come like this, and in particular, when I would come with the hot coffee pot, people would always, get back, understandably. And so one day I came, I had several plates, and I had one little plate on my little finger, and it slid off, and it was buttered toast. And a man who was wearing a nice dress shirt, he grabbed the toast, and the butter ran down his shirt. And it was the wife left a comment saying, "It's a good thing my husband is good at catching toast." But at any rate, um, so after being a waitress for some time, I decided that it would be best that I went to school and get an education. Um, but I am dyslexic, so that added another problem. For many years, I didn't know I had MS. I didn't know quite what was wrong with me. And uh, most people, because of course they didn't live inside my body, they didn't realize that I was sick. They thought maybe I was lazy. I didn't like to do many things, and I thought the same of myself because I didn't understand what was going on. I did in fact go on to get an education, but unfortunately, while I was in graduate school, my health really did decline, and I was unable to finish. I was going to school in psychology. I was halfway through my master's. Um, but really, the issue was that I could never depend on how I would feel. And of course, you really can't go into work as a therapist or whatever you're doing, teaching, um, and kind of be like this, because I fade in and out during the course of a day. And that's really what made the Alano Club so wonderful, because I've always wanted to be productive. I've always wanted to add to the world in any way that I could, anything that came through me that I could give it. But that wasn't always possible. Like right now, I'm home, and so um, that's what makes YouTube just the perfect medium to form a community. Change what you thought was what your life was going to look like. And I've had to do that many times. And ultimately, each time that I've done that, although it was difficult, in walking through that, I found some real gold. Um, so I want to share that with you if I possibly can. And for many years in my family, um, there was a lot of shame associated with um, being on any kind of assistance. And it was always, my grandma helped me immensely. My grandmother was my greatest hero. And she really meant a great deal to me and still does. So she she wanted me to go back to school, and I wanted to go back to school, and I wanted to become something. As you know, in my family, it was very much, uh, being having a PhD was somewhere up there with being maybe for some other people the Pope. So I wanted to go to school and get an education, and I wanted to, make the family proud. And I felt like really that was the only way that I could. Um, I had this idea that approval was a form of love. Um, and it isn't exactly. It's very dissatisfying in the end. So basically, I've had to become who I actually am, and I'm hoping that on maybe I can share some of the ways in which I became comfortable with being who I actually am, and maybe help you become more comfortable in being who you actually are, and how probably you are absolutely the best person at being you, just like I'm the best person at being me. It's really all I can be. So I'd like to be the best me that I can. And at this point, that person has multiple sclerosis, and that person fades in and out during the course of a day. Um, so for many years, my grandmother, who I just mentioned, supported me. Um, and because that was the kind of family I came from, and it was hoped that I could go back to school. As the years went on, that became very clear that that was not possible. And ultimately, uh, after my grandmother passed, I I was living in my car at that point, and I applied for SSI. I was extremely fortunate. Most people are not so fortunate. Um, I a friend of mine drove me, and she had had she had had breast cancer, and she had had she had been over radiated. They had made an accident. And at any rate, it turned out that through the disability hearing, her doctor was going to be unable to be at the hearing because he had some health challenges of his own, and she was terrified that she would not be able to get her disability. And but she decided she was just going to go make a friend. It was harder for the doctor who was interviewing her uh, to turn down someone he liked rather than someone he didn't, who was over anxious and trying to prove how ill they were. And so I was very fortunate that she was the person who gave me a ride to my doctor's, because I went in there and she said, just go in there and talk to him like you would talk to anyone, and just forget about being disabled, because you are, and he'll examine you. And he was a neurologist. So um, that's exactly what I did. And I received my disability within, I think it was 3 months, 3.5 months, I got the letter. So that was really fantastic, because I've had friends who were very ill, who uh, took years and years. Um, so I was very fortunate. I got SSI. Um, and there had always been really quite a shame in my family about the idea of that. Um, and maybe not so much in my family, but me personally, I felt that. I'm not going to put that on my family. I'll take that. Um, and so um, then I had SSI to live on. And ultimately, if you watched my first video, if you haven't, you can do so. I'll link it at the end of this video, um, about how I went to get a Section 8 voucher. And I'll tell you, when I came back, it was kind of a harrowing experience going to get that Section 8 voucher. I came back after 16 months, I think it was, uh, to the area where I had originally been living, and I transferred my voucher. And that was so difficult. Um, and the reason it was so difficult, there were a few reasons. I I had very little money, and so when I drove back, I had to drive back, and then I was staying in my car in one of the parking lots that I used to stay in when I was running the club. And this time I had my cat with me, and she was having to endure this as well. I nearly lost the voucher. Um, if it hadn't been for my cousin, who ended up giving me the deposit money, for the Section 8 woman in New Mexico who helped me, and for my dear, dear friend Ben, who has since passed on, who was a very high-powered attorney who gave me services for free and happened to be friends with the mayor of the city I had moved to. Um, I would have lost my voucher and my 16 months, and I am forever grateful. I had come back, and there are some wonderful people who work at Section 8 offices, including the woman in New Mexico, and several people I've met along the way who are extraordinarily helpful and compassionate. But unfortunately, I've also met some people who are not that way. And for whatever reason, in particular, I met this woman, and I don't know um, if perhaps I reminded her of someone she didn't like from her past. I have no idea, but she really took a dislike to me. And they're supposed to help you get an apartment, and they're supposed to inspect it within a certain number of days. And she was refusing to do this after I had found a place. I was staying in my car with my now cat that I had, and trying to drag her around because I didn't want her to get hot in my car. And it was difficult. And ultimately, when she delayed, I had set everything up, but it was very, as those of you who know, who have lived on disability or a very fixed income, you have everything sort of set up, and if anything happens that screws up that plan, you're in trouble. And that's kind of what happened, because I had, through the United Way, I had procured the money, which was I believe like $1,500, and this was in 2008, to pay for my security deposit, because I didn't have that kind of money. And so, at any rate, the man asked me, could I get a verification of, approximately how much my rent would be. And I asked the Section 8 woman, would she, just, it could, I said it didn't have to be a specific amount, it just had to be something that said, between, my portion of the rent was going to be X number of dollars to X number of dollars, a third of my income approximately. Which she absolutely refused to give me any sort of estimate. And the problem was that this man from the United Way um, had the money, but he was going to have to give it out. He only had a couple of days in which to disperse it, and unless I was able to get him this thing from the Section 8 office, um, he had to give the money to someone else, and perhaps that person needed it more. So I'll have to look at it that way. So the couple of, I kept trying to get her to do it. She refused. And when that happened, well, of course, he had to give the money to someone else. So now I no longer had the money for a deposit. I had a very short window of time in which to get it, or I would lose my voucher, and my whole trip and everything that happened in between would have been sort of wasted. And it was a very difficult um, period. So at any rate, I was very fortunate because I had resources. They were very harsh at that particular office. I saw them grilling people. It was really sad. I remember I was sitting in the office, and there was a woman whose first language was not English, and she was probably in her 80s or 90s, and she kept going to the bank and getting bank statements, but apparently this was not what they wanted. They wanted a different kind of statement from the bank or something, which I couldn't even understand because I was trying to help this woman. And they were rude. It was terrible. ultimately, when my friend, who was an attorney, a very high-powered attorney, a very expensive attorney, uh, helped me, um, he was friends with the mayor, which was also very helpful. Um, when this woman began to help me and going ahead with helping me to do these things, she was really very shocked because she didn't assume that a woman who was living in her car um, had a friend like that who could help. And she was shocked. And because she was used to taking whatever her issues were out on um, people who were helpless. And, oftentimes when you're disabled in certain ways, you don't have the same kind of power that other people have. Um, and so it's very difficult. And people, I think she looked at me, and during this period of time, I was, although shaking, um, I walk normally, I think. Some people say I look a little off kilter, but anyway, um, there have been periods where that's not been the case. I was paralyzed for 6 months, and after that, had to use a quad cane for some time as that side of my body came back, my right side. But I want to link below a site that I found that has been very helpful to me, and perhaps would be helpful to you if maybe some of you out there are suffering from long COVID or have recently become disabled, or are just trying to navigate the system. And it's called the Sleepy Girl's Guide to Disability, and I'm going to link that in the comment section. Uh, Unfortunately, the woman who made this site passed away a few years ago. Um, she had an invisible disability, but unfortunately, it led to her death. And but the people who found help from her community have kept that site going. And I have to say, it is an amazing site. It really spells out so many things that I learned over many, many years, and I think you'll find it helpful if you yourself have a disability, you're living on SSI, you're living on a limited income, you're trying to get into low income housing, those kinds of things. It can be very, very helpful, this site. It's just a written site, and I'll link it in the bottom. And until next time, I'll see you next time. All right. It was great. It was uncomfortable. I was very nervous. I want to say this. Please, if you enjoyed this content, will you please and share this video, subscribe, any of those three things. They're all free, and they help to spread uh, this channel so that we can begin to develop a community. In the future, I hope to do some live streams, maybe where we can interact. That would be really awesome. And I hope that you have an absolutely wonderful day. All right, see you next time.